Jordan, take us back before real estate. What were you doing, and how did you even choose to get into this craziness called real estate?
Yeah, so I started at Texas A&M where I graduated, and I started out of the workforce in 2008 when basically the economy was crashing and there weren't jobs. I had a father-in-law in oil and gas, and he was an executive and helped all of us get into oil and gas in a time that was really difficult to get a job. So I found myself with a psychology degree in procurement for an oil and gas company, an engineering company essentially. And after that, my husband, who sold corporate benefit insurance, the year we got married, we actually made a difficult choice to live in two different cities, San Antonio versus Houston, which are 3 hours apart. And no sales positions were coming up out of his training, except a position finally did come up in Miami. So we up and moved to Miami, where I worked for procurement for education under Kaplan. You may have heard of them. They're a subsidiary of the Washington Post. So I gained a background in contracts and negotiation from that. Not really sure where life was going to take me with that, with a psychology degree. However, when I moved to Dallas-Fort Worth, pregnant with my oldest son, Aiden, I decided to stay home for a year and take a year off and really pursue what set my soul on fire. I had done that for my husband with our moves. And so finally moving back after 3 years in Miami, he said, take some time and figure out what you want to do. We actually ended up buying a house, and the real estate agent that we used was nothing short of a moron. And
it's always either really good or really bad.
And I thought, gosh, if he can do that, I can do that. I really like looking at homes, and I understand contracts and negotiation. So it just kind of felt like a really easy, good fit.
So you move across the country, literally. You get into procurement for these different companies, and then it's time to make a decision for yourself. And I actually kind of want to ask you a question about that. You know, I think a lot of times, if one spouse, for instance, is an entrepreneur or is in business, climbing the corporate ladder, sometimes couples can struggle with like the back and forth, especially if it means launching into an entrepreneurial endeavor. I'm curious what your husband said when you were like, I want to do real estate. And then he was like, did he take back that, wait, don't take time to figure out what you want to do? Or was he like supportive, jump all in? What did that look like?
Yeah. So anybody who knows Matt, my husband, Matt, knows he's incredibly supportive. In fact, he actually jumped in our business for 3 years to help set up some systems as we were growing so quick and scaling. But he was incredibly supportive. And if I needed to show on nights and weekends and all of that, it was no big deal. I got the kids. That's great. Go get it, babe. I'm proud of you. And so, yeah, I never had pushback from Matt. He was always my biggest fan.
That's awesome. What did that first couple years look like for you? I mean, did you see immediate success, or were there failures?
So I sold 17 homes, and keep in mind, we're not from Dallas-Fort Worth. So I didn't have much of a sphere to speak of. I did open houses. Friends and family told friends and family about me, right? So I sold 17 homes my first year. I just really fell in love with helping people find their home. So I guess you would consider that successful. Of course, I capped. Our average price point at the time was $175,000. So getting to the $2 million capping mark was about 12 homes. It took a while. So I got just over that and realized that at 100% with the Keller Williams model, like I was really making money, right? And then my cap started over again, and I was like, okay, let's do that again, but faster. In my second year, I was so productive, I produced a child. So
no one can, we can't top that.
So I sold 24 homes, and I had my son Carson. But one thing I didn't tell you is that I came really close to losing my oldest, Aiden. He was in low fluid. His placenta was basically failing. And so he ended up coming at 34 weeks, but I was on bed rest for 4 or 5 weeks with him. So he threatened to come early at like 29 weeks, which he wouldn't have made it. So when I got pregnant with Carson, I got really afraid of, making sure the baby stayed healthy and all of that. So I actually spent 6 weeks on bed rest during that year. And out of boredom and refusal to slow down, I started a transaction coordination company. And so I was TCing for other people in exchange for them showing for me.
So let me ask you this, Jordan. When, I think most people would say that 17 units your first year and 24 your second year is a pretty strong start, especially with all those other challenges you just mentioned, and in a city where you did not have a big sphere of influence. So just kind of from a high level, what was your primary source of business? How did you approach it that way?
Yeah, so it was a lot of anybody that I worked with in the past. So once I had a person that wanted to work with me, it was, who else do you know? I'm building a business. I was very honest. One of my 5 traits that I've chosen as like my key traits, that's a core trait of mine, is vulnerability. So from the get-go, it could have really, kicked me in the tail to say, I'm new at this. But I think people found it endearing that I was very honest with, I'm new at this. I'm looking to build a business and a career. I would really love to be your realtor for life. Please consider me a resource. But also what that means is that I need clients to help. Who do you know that's looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate? So I got really diligent about, and I said, or who do you know who's well connected that I could call? And so one person that I was working with would connect me with another person that was really connected. I also was calling vendors and asking the same question until I was basically building a database of people that I could call. Simultaneously, of course, there's the Right Now business, which to me was open houses. So I was going and sitting at open houses and meeting people face to face there. And, I would say, hey, I'm going to be really honest with you. I'm new. I'm a year and a half in the business. I've had some success, but I am fairly new. But I can tell you, if I don't know an answer to something, I have a whole team of support with my brokerage behind me that I will get you that answer, and I will be available to you. And you can count on me to hold your hand and be alongside you in this process. And I think a lot of people found that honesty and vulnerability endearing and wanted to work with me.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you really made a concerted effort to be connected right from the get-go in a vulnerable way. You were building a web of connectedness to kind of force database growth.
I think we forget that there's power in the words "help me." Everybody wants to be the person with the answer, but when you can pick up the phone or meet somebody and say, this is what I'm trying to do, do you have a way, that you could help me? And it takes some vulnerability in doing that, and checking your ego. But at the same time, people love to help. There's nothing more. I mean, you can see it on the GoFundMe accounts, right? There's nothing more we love as a human being than to help others achieve their dreams. And so I just built a community asking for help.
It's a big deal to tap into that, because I mean, we all have conversations with talented people every day, Joe, Jordan, myself, and the thing we probably hear the most is, what gets you going? Well, I love helping people. Mm-hmm. And yet when it comes to building our business, we sometimes don't realize that. We don't go out and ask the question. So I think that's very insightful.
Yeah. And this is a strategy that obviously worked very well for you, Jordan, because just a few years later, I mean, now I'm looking back at 2020, 100 listings taken, over 200 units sold, $60 million. So walk us through that progression of how you're able to scale this concept in a fairly short period of time, build a millionaire real estate agent, 7th level team.
Yeah. So my 3rd year, I sold 45 homes. That was the year that I hired a transaction coordinator. I kept waiting around for permission to hire this transaction coordinator. And I went to family reunion, and Wendy Papasan was talking about leverage and what your dollar per hour is, and how if you can hire somebody for a lower dollar per hour than you could potentially make, then that's a hire you should make, whether it's lawn care, child care, cleaning the house, whatever. And that's when I realized, I need a transaction coordinator. So my transaction coordinator, who actually still works with me today, is my stepdad. He is retired director of radiology for hospitals and was just really struggling in retirement. And so when I left that, I went and asked him, would you do this with me? Would you want to do this? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, do you need to talk to my mom, your wife? And he's like, no, when do I start? And I was like, well, do you want to know what you're going to be doing? He's like, no, when do I start? I'm like, you want to know what I'm going to pay you? He's like, no, when do I start? And so I actually went it was in New Orleans that year. So I drove from New Orleans back to Dallas after family reunion. I went to bed the next morning. I woke up at 5 a.m. and I headed to Oklahoma City. That's where they live. And I trained him. And you know what, guys? I found myself going and looking for business in order to give him more to do, because I only had about 5 hours for him at first, right? And then it turned to 10 as I grew business. And what I really found was that my why and the reason I got up in the morning was to help other people's dreams come true. And interestingly enough, as I focused on that, I've made more and more and more money and had more success and more sales, continuing to try to push them into their dreams and helping them become a reality, which has been a really cool, I mean, that's just what gives me chill bumps is, helping my inside sales agent actually take a vacation to the beach and take her kids to the beach for once. My director of operations, her husband qualified for CrossFit Games. He's in the top 20 in the world in his age bracket and is going to be on ESPN. And we're getting an opportunity to sponsor him in that and pay for all the things for them so they can go. Stuff like that just totally gets me going. So we sold 45 homes, then we grew to 90 as we added a buyer's agent and an in-office admin. The next year did about 122. Matt joined me in the business, 145, 180, 210 was last year. And this year's goal is 270, which we're pacing for. So it was just really about a strong motivation and a why, because there's still so many times I want to quit. Getting in business with talent and training them and then getting out of their way and just being there for, go try it, fall on your face. I'll be here to help you pick it up. Right. And I have an agent on our team, Ann Putnam, that just celebrated 4 years with our team. Charles at 5 years still works with our team. I hired my inside sales agent, Valencia, just after Charles. So she also just celebrated 5 years with our team. So we just have a culture and history of people that I'm super bought into and totally in love with, and helping them get to their goals and dreams. And in turn, we just don't really have a retention issue. So we can keep building because we're all building together, and I've got the same people building, and it lets you run faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The human psychology is such an interesting thing to me, because what I heard you say, Jordan, was as soon as you had this TC, now you felt almost obligated. You wanted to go get more business to give this person something to do every day. And so it's so interesting how we're willing to do more for others in a certain way, which the byproduct of is, of course, building your business. Now, I want to ask you a specific question around that, because while you were talking about hiring a TC, there was a inflection point in your voice when you said how much more money you could potentially make. And so I'm curious to just have you expand on that a little bit. When somebody's thinking about hiring a transaction coordinator, what did you mean by that potentially?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at the time I had sold 24 homes. Our average commission was about $4,000. So I was making about $90,000 minus my cap. It took me to about, $65,000 a year. So Wendy Papazon was teaching us that if you divide that by 2,000 hours, that gives you your dollar per hour rate. And my dollar per hour was right around 30, a little bit over 30, maybe 32. And I realized that Charles was going to, or this person, I didn't know it was Charles at the time, was going to work from home, do paperwork. I could probably hire something like $12 an hour. And basically, we talk a lot about your 80-20. So what is your 20% that achieves 80% of your daily goals or your annual goal? 20% of our activities do that. If I could get more in my top 20% and leverage off that 80%, how much more could I go do? So I, realized, okay, so my goal was to sell, we had gone from 24, I was going to work on selling 45 homes a year. And again, at an average commission of $4,000, that was going to go to like 160,000 minus my cap would put us at about 130,000. If I could achieve that goal this year, divide that by the 2,000 hours I was going to work. And my dollar per hour went from like 32 to 70. And so if I could give him at $12 an hour, some of the work that was taking me 10 or 15 hours a week, and I could go get more business with that time, then my net would be far greater. And I also would be spending more time in my strength zone, which is talking to people and building relationships, showing homes, negotiating. Those were the things that gave me energy. Making sure our compliance documents were in was not giving me energy. unless I was at home on bed rest and had nothing better to do, right? Like, it's just, that wasn't my strength zone.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a business owner thinks. That is wonderful. Well, eloquently said.
Subsequently, I had just gotten off bed rest 4 months before. I had a 4-month-old at this point, and I had built that, remember, transaction coordination business. And so I was able to give Charles that TC work for them and process all the files for them as well. So I could charge them $100. I could pay him $36 to process a file, and I was making the delta. So I had 2 companies running simultaneously.
I love that. And I love how you took basically a math equation, presented it, because it takes a lot of fear out of it. The first hire can be scary, but if you are able to chunk it down into a math equation like that and say, all right, does my dollar per hour go up with this hire and keep me in my strength zone? Then that's perfect. Another thing that you said kind of along those that journey there, you talked about discovering your why, and it involved bringing him into your world and wanting to make sure that he was provided for. And I've heard you talk about this before, the conversation around your why. Mm-hmm. And we were even together in a room once. And I remember one of my top agents asking you about, well, what if I don't know that? And you very eloquently brought her through, I think you called it a bunch of little whys on the way to your big why. And I was curious if you could just share your thoughts around that for a couple minutes.
Yeah. So at Keller Williams, we talk a lot about your big why, and we almost big why shame people for not having a big why, by like even asking people, what is your big why? It seems so overwhelming that you're like, well, I don't, and the girl next to you is like building water wells for children in a third world country. And you're like, I just wanted to buy a Gucci bag, and that feels so shallow. Right. And so I went around for about 2 years successful, but without a big why. And they always said, you can't be successful without a big why. And I was like, well, I don't know how to explain. I just feel like I did pretty good. But what I found later for myself personally was my big why is in other people and making their dreams come true. However, in business planning, the KW University business planning course, they have a really cool worksheet that has little whys, and it's other things that are important to you that you want to achieve. And sometimes your why could be an annual why. What is your why for this year, right? And sometimes you can take those little whys and you can list out the 5, 6, 8 things you want to do in the next 30 days, 90 days, 365 days, or even 3 years, and find like an overarching theme that becomes your why. And sometimes it just gets wrapped up in, financial independence to and then all your little whys are listed there. And that can be your big why, but it's also okay to have a bunch of little whys. And I feel like a vision board is really helpful for taking your little whys and putting them into one thing that you're working towards.
Definitely. So there was a point in your career a few years back where, you found all this success, and you had the opportunity to go on stage with Gary. And I understand that you were doing a lot of life work at that point. And I'm curious, just because you are so vulnerable, and I think, vulnerability just is powerful, and it could change a lot of people's worlds. Take us into some of that life work that you're doing. You've grown a successful business. You have a beautiful, thriving family. What's going on inside?
Yeah.
And what's the work you're doing?
So at this point, I had an opportunity. Keller Williams started a company called Keller Mortgage, and they were basically giving away the loan for free if, you worked with a Keller Williams agent. It was a new concept. Not many agents were jumping on board, and we just jumped on it and ran with it because I saw the value from the get-go. David, it's how we met, right? Like, it led me to reach out and meet a lot of people that wanted training in it eventually and all of that. And just by serendipity, it was at the time that Gary Keller really wanted to showcase to agents how there's other agents out there that are growing their business through using it. And we had grown our business, tracked it, told our story, and we were in the process of just kind of a grassroots traveling and teaching about it. And he had an opportunity for us to be on stage and talk about our success. And, I've sat there at family reunion and mega camp, and I've watched giants, heroes get up there and talk about these incredible businesses and things that they're doing that are scalable and huge successes and incredible things that they're building through them. And I dealt with, when we had the opportunity and Smokey Garrett, my OP, let me know that we were going to be on stage, I really dealt with this imposter syndrome of who am I? I'm from Oklahoma. I grew up, pretty poor. I had a roof over my head. I was really lucky, but I had a, 3-bedroom, 1-bath home, 1,200 square feet. And oftentimes we needed help to get by, right? In fact, we took my son to enroll him in kindergarten, and my husband was like, "Why do you need a credit card for lunches? Lunches are free." And I was like, "Oh, honey, lunches are free when you're that poor. They're not free for everybody." So my husband grew up the same way, right? And so I really struggled through this. Why me? They're going to figure out that I'm just making this up as I go. I don't know what I'm talking about. I was scripted. I knew Keller Mortgage as the product. I knew how it had helped us grow this business, but I just felt very unworthy of the opportunity. And I did a lot of soul searching with my MAPS coach, Jordan Freed. And, he had me do some quiet time and really processing through, if this were your child, how would you advise your child, right? Which is a great lens. That's a perspective for all of us as we're growing, is what would you say to your child if they came to you with this problem, right? And eventually I came down to this idea that, actually nobody's worthy of being up there. There is no perfect person that is crushing it and nailing it in every aspect of their life. I'm sure there's other people that get up there and say, "Man, I hope they don't learn that my family's falling apart. Man, I hope they don't learn that, what I had to take out a second loan on the business to make this work," right? And so I just realized that we're all functioning and this set of criteria that they want to match us with. And there is no perfect person. There's no perfect person for a job. There's no perfect person for another person, right? You all wake up every day and you do your best and you try your hardest. And it's almost like you want to figure out the equation, because if you could wrap your arms around it, you would risk potentially not losing the opportunity. And I think that's what was at the base of it, was a fear that I was so excited for this opportunity and to finally be in a place that somebody would want to know my story, like everybody I've sat and listened to in awe of. And in that moment, I just realized, if you stop trying to control it, if you stop trying to wrap your arms around it, and you just realize that I was in the right place at the right time, working on the right thing, and those opportunities will continue to come up again. I'm not worthy of it. In fact, nobody's worthy of it. And this idea that there is a perfect candidate to put up there, if that ceases to exist to be true, then all of us are worthy in our unworthiness to just go out there and do your best. It really came full circle because I was sitting at a women's retreat for my coach, and there was a girl there that had just started a productivity coaching program that was scaling. And she said, the best thing, our coach is Jordan Freed, that Jordan ever taught me. And she described this idea of, I'm not worthy, nobody's worthy. And she's crying and I'm crying. And Jordan Freed says, I'd like you to meet the creator of that concept, Jordan Davis. And it made me realize in that moment, we're all eager to lead, but leadership is that. It's processing something, getting through it, and then turning around and helping the next person get through it. And we all want to lead on these huge platforms that affect a lot of people. But if you think back to what changed your life, moments that changed your life, they were probably one person connecting with you one-on-one, reaching into you and helping you through something. And that to me was just life-changing in my leadership journey.
I feel like I just sat through a a Tony Robbins event.
That was incredible. I love the self-awareness. I mean, that was a really cool journey to hear about. And you mentioned at the beginning, quiet time. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that. That's something that I've been a little bit more intentional about. And I'd love to hear more about your journey and how you went about quiet time and how that ultimately served you and led you to what you just were able to describe for us.
Yeah. Quiet time is something that I also have struggled with. I tore my ACL. So I was on bed rest twice with kids, right? With babies. I've torn my ACL twice and been on bed rest for that. And I've re-injured my hurt knee again a third time. And the other day somebody said to me, and it was like, man, God's got something to teach you. You're just not listening. And I was like, no, you're probably exactly right. I need to slow down and stop, going all the time.
The way to slow Jordan down is just take her out at the knees.
Take her out at the knees. Yeah. And so it was just like, I do need to slow down and have that time. And, I think it was Oprah that talked about, prayer is when we tell the world what we need it to hear, and God what we need it to hear, or him to hear. And meditation is when they tell us, the world and God and whatever your belief system is, right? Mine, I believe in God. And so it's the quiet time when that gets spoken back into us. And so I think it's something that you just have to practice. Everybody thinks if you can't sit still for an hour and quietly meditate and not be thinking about the grocery list or, what you got to do to get done at work or whatever, you failed. But we actually talked about this at that same women's retreat. And Jordan Freed was saying success isn't not having your mind trail. It's how many times you bring your mind back into just, that quietness, not going into task oriented, et cetera. And so it's honestly just a practice. My husband and I are both doing a 75 hard right now. And some of it is quiet time. And so, right now it's 10 minutes of quiet time, not checking my phone, not checking whatever, and not letting other people's priorities become mine. But when I find my biggest breakthroughs, honestly, truthfully, they're usually during massages.
Yeah.
I mean, If you just tell them like, I don't really want to talk, and you don't have your cell phone, and nobody can make their priorities your priorities unless there's a fire, right? Yep. Like a literal physical fire. Other than that, nobody can get a hold of you. And some of my greatest breakthroughs and ideas are when I'm forced to be quiet.
Well, psychologically, I mean, there's a mind-body connection there that we could probably spend a whole episode on in and of itself. I don't do this often, make recommendations, but as I listen to you talk, Jordan, it brings me into this powerful story that I read actually when I was in Austin for Mega Camp, I believe it was a couple of years ago, or some other training. And it's called Hillbilly Elegy or Elegy. People say it differently with JD Vance. And I'd encourage any of you guys out there to pick that up. JD walks through his story of coming from poverty and how one of the driving motivators in a very unhealthy way in his success was that fear of going back to that. And this unworthiness, this imposter syndrome. And it's very powerful to walk through, because I don't care whether you come from poverty or you come from riches or whatever, we all have a little piece, like you're saying, Jordan, of this shame or unworthiness, name it what you want to name it. We all resonate with that. And I believe that part of success is coming to grips with that and realize, like, learning how to, in a healthy way, cope with that. Yeah. So that you don't, spill that and ooze it all over everyone else.
Well, and sometimes you'll sabotage yourself to get back to what you know to do, which is to, constantly be the underdog and be working at it. And so I know people who have torn down their businesses, and I think subconsciously they just don't know how to operate at that level of success, right? And so that's really important to study. My newest thing has been, okay, the boxes are checked and I feel like our business is running and doing really well. I mean, it will be easy for us to scale from here, and we have most of what we need. So when I attend things that have ideas and, we have a steady flow of leads, that's no problem. We have clear vision of where we're going, no problem, right? I've partnered with Place and Ben Kinney and Chris Suarez, and we have a ton of growth and retention with our agents through there, no problem. So I just was like, why am I still unhappy? And at that same conference, I raised my hand to my coach and I said, am I just incapable of experiencing joy? And because he's coached me for 4 years, he said, no, you've just been the underdog for 35 years. And the only thing you know is the struggle. And just like you were conditioned and your central nervous system is basically in shock from always being in fight mode, you have to condition and practice joy, abundance, and gratitude. You're not broken. You've just operated for 35 years in this, arena, and you've got to condition yourself to operate in another. So that's what I'm currently practicing is I've arrived, and how do I experience it as joy?
I love this whole conversation because I think just the awareness of, okay, I'm not the only one that struggles with these self-limiting beliefs sometimes is just an encouraging thought in and of itself. And then to know that there are practices and strategies and techniques and tools accessible to us to overcome these things is super empowering. And I love what you just said, Jordan, at the end. It's a practice. You can't just read a book and be fixed. It's something that you have to implement every day, every week, and you're going to fall off track and there's going to be struggles and you're going to look back and say, ooh, I could have handled that differently. But the idea is to constantly grow and to constantly make progress through the journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as you practice abundance and gratitude and joy and continue to grow in that area, Jordan, as a leader, like where do you see yourself and your business going next?
So, the team is a reflection of the leader, and my team is also always in everything's on fire mode, right? And so I'm really working with them through modeling and through asking them at the beginning of every coaching session or every meeting, like, what are you grateful for? Or in Team Huddle, for our team, we fill buckets, right? And so it acknowledges that other people on the team helped you get where you've gone through. And then it also gives permission for new people to ask because they know that this is what we do. And so modeling it, bringing it into our everyday life and practice, I also take time to remind the team, there was a time when you prayed to be where you're at right now. And you have all different struggles that you're so focused on. But there was a time when I remember in coaching or just talking to you in your life when you prayed to have these types of problems. There was a time when you were like, if I could just have clients to work with. Now you have clients to work with and they're all pissing you off. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You have to take some time to be grateful for the clients. And so it is a habit and it is a practice that you've got to work on. Journaling can help with that as well too. But gosh, I just would love it. Everybody in my organization has the ability to make six figures. There was a day when I was on a training and they said, if you made twice as much money as next year, it was like a challenge. What kind of house would you live in? And I was like, live in my house. And what kind of car would you drive? And I was like, I drive my car. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of vacations would you go on? I'm like, I go on great vacations. And that's when I realized I had made it. And I thought, if I made twice as much money and my people didn't, I failed. So I created a path of what would it look like for everybody in my organization, the administrative team, as well as the sales. The sales already have a way to make six figures, right? But what would it have to look like for my ISA to make six figures, for my director of operations to make six figures, for my director of recruiting to make six figures? And so I sat down and created a plan with them for that. So, and then not only that, but here's the thing, they'll never go make that kind of money if they don't know what they would do with that kind of money because they have a financial barometer. So then we started looking at, and what would you do with that? And where would you spend that? And what would that do for your life? And really digging into their why and their motivation and helping them create their why. And then a plan to let's go achieve it. So right now, my inside sales agent and she is, by the way, a baller. She's amazing. If you haven't met her and you ever need something on agent training for setting appointments, her name is Valencia Brown, and she is a boss babe.
You brag on Valencia every time I see you anywhere. I love it.
She's amazing. And we're starting a group coaching program through Ben and Forward Coaching for a series called Converted, which is going to be about appointment setting. So especially for agents or ISA. But through coaching, she's going to be able to make the six figures that she literally has never had anybody in her family ever make. And so I see us continuing to break the barriers of their thinking and their financial barometer and doing that together. And it's just crazy because there's a way in that for me to make more money, and it never crossed my mind, but it's going to happen. And I just don't ever worry about that. And I worry about getting them where they want to go, or our clients, the homes they want, the investments they want, building the wealth portfolio. And just as a positive consequence, I end up making money.
That's awesome. I love it. Jordan, we could talk to you all day, and we'll definitely talk more and have additional episodes with you, I'm sure, in the days to come. But we need to transition into the last segment of our show, 3, 2, 1, action. 3 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. Question number 1. Who is the one most influential person who has had the biggest impact on your business?
On my business? I thought you were going to say my life. My coach, Jordan Freed, it's unusual to coach with somebody for 4 years. It requires that the coach continue to grow as well as the business continue to grow, and that they grow side by side. And Jordan was very open to my partnership with Ben Kinney and Chris Suarez and what that would bring to the table and do for the team. He also knows how to push me and know that I'm not going to be unhappy. I'm not going to be happy when I leave that call when he pushes. And that's okay. That's not about him. That's about my growth. So I would say that's the single person who's had the biggest impact on our business, as he not only helps us grow, and Ben Kinney is very much this way as well, but in the business, but also grow in mindset.
That's awesome.
So we don't always do this, but given the context of our conversation, same question in your personal life.
I mean, aside from like your husband, like your spouse, right? That's obviously going to have a big impact in your parents. My brother, Jason, a lot of what my coach and I talk about, a lot of the things in business translate back to what I learned in volleyball. And some people don't know this, that I actually had a scholarship to go redshirt and play volleyball in college. I was in middle school, graduating 8th grade. And I was like, I think I'm going to try out for the volleyball team. And I had a bunch of friends tell me that I wouldn't ever make it. I wouldn't make the team. I didn't even own knee pads or the right shoes or whatever. My oldest brother actually forgot to pick me up for practice. So I walked to, I have 2 brothers. I walked to the other brother, the one closest in age to me. His name's Jason. I walked to his work and I came in and said, hey, would you take me home? And he was like, you have volleyball tryouts today. And I was like, yeah, I decided not to try out. And I burst into tears and I said, my friend said, I've never played before. There's no way I'll make the team, whatever. And so, my brother went into work and said, can you give me, an hour off and I'll come back? He said, we're going to volleyball practice and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to watch you until you're having fun and you don't even know I'm there anymore. And that's exactly what happened. I started having fun. I started really enjoying myself. He said, when you go in there, you're going to run everywhere. Don't ever let the coach see you walk. You run everywhere. Even if it's to take a water break, you run. So anyway, we come to like final of tryouts and they're listing off who's going to make the team. And he's like, the very last player that's going to make the team is Jordan Sims, which is my maiden name. You're terrible at volleyball. You don't know anything about anything, but you run everywhere. You hustle everywhere you go, and you're going to make the other girls work that much harder. And so had my brother not stood in the gap for me and stood up for my potential, I mean, there's so much from a leadership and a confidence and transferable skills that I learned playing volleyball. So go on to, I ended up playing club. I ended up being MVP. I ended up getting a college scholarship, just really, really good and talented at it. And I mean, it kept me busy through high school. It literally changed my life. And that one person was willing to stand in the gap and inconvenience their day and stand up for my potential when I, was taking a stance for my excuses.
And to your earlier point, that's what true leadership is.
Mm-hmm.
It's that one-on-one impact. Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful. So
And I feel like that's what our
too.
world and generation is missing, is that one-on-one mentorship, because everybody wants to be famous.
Yeah, totally. All right. Question number 2. What's the most influential book on your business?
4 Disciplines of Execution.
Okay. It's a good one.
So Lance Loken sent that book to me the first time I had an ACL tear, and our business was not profitable. There were months when we were losing money, and we realized that we needed to get a major source of business, and we needed it to be free. And the 4 Disciplines of Execution is a book that tells you why you start diets and never follow through with them, why you start a project and we all have, like, who's tried like knitting and never gone through with it, or started a book and never finished it, or whatever. So it is strategies. And I feel like we've used it over and over in our business, but it's strategies to implement anything in your life or business that is important, and how to implement that. And that is, defining the wildly important goal, setting lead measures, creating a scoreboard, and establishing accountability. And those are the 4 disciplines that when you create around anything, you will achieve big results.
Perfect.
And our team has scoreboards everywhere and accountability every week. I mean, it's just become a part of our culture.
Jordan, as you know, this is the All In Podcast, where we encourage our listeners to go out and take this content and put it into movement. So what is one action item that you would tell our listeners to go take today to move the needle forward in their life and in their business?
I would say go find one person that you can influence and make their life better. Because like I did with my stepdad, you may find that you get up every morning a little bit earlier and work a little bit harder because somebody's watching you, or because somebody's relying on you. Or maybe you've already developed a ton of life lessons and you've made it in your production or in your career or whatever. Pick up the phone and figure out who is that one person that's right behind me that I can just help pull up along the way.
Thank you so much for your time and energy and wisdom and insight. We've learned, our listeners have learned. If our listeners want to find more of your content, Jordan, where can they find you?
So on Facebook, I have a group, Real Estate Plus, it's the plus sign, Real Life. And that's where I am vulnerable about successes and failures. And I know you guys are on there and you see that I'm pretty transparent with what I share. And then also just hacks for our business, what works, the insights of our business. And then also just sometimes my personal thoughts and feelings and where we're at.
Good stuff. We'll link that up in the show notes.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at AIpodcast.com.
As always,
we also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play all in.